They didn't notice I left. Not for 8 months. 8 months of silence, of building a new life 3 states away while they carried on like I'd never existed. But the moment my brother announced his wedding, suddenly I mattered again. Suddenly they remembered my bank account. $15,000, they said, for the venue. Like I was some ATM they'd forgotten the PIN to until now. They didn't just forget me. They erased me until they needed my money. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I've been dead to my family for exactly 8 months and 12 days. Not literally dead, of course, just forgotten, erased, like I never existed at all. I figured this out on a Tuesday morning in Brighton Bay, Oregon, while standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like freedom until it starts feeling like loneliness. Sunlight streamed through the windows I'd spent 3 weekends washing until they sparkled, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself. Everything here was mine. Every choice, every scratch in the furniture, every book on the shelves arranged exactly how I wanted them. It was 7:15 a.m., and I was thinking about calling in sick to work just to sit in this silence a little longer, when I realized I couldn't remember the last time my phone had buzzed with a message from home. Home. Even thinking the word felt strange now. Maplewood, Indiana, population 12,000, where everyone knew your business before you did, where my parents still lived in the same house where I'd grown up, where my brother Caleb had moved back after college because why wouldn't he? Everything had always been handed to him on a silver platter. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my messages. Work colleagues, my dentist's office, a guy from Bumble who couldn't take a hint, but nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad, nothing from Caleb. 8 months. I'd left Maplewood on a rainy Thursday in February, loaded everything I owned into a U-Haul trailer that cost more than my first month's rent here, and drove 19 hours straight to the Oregon coast. I'd texted my parents when I arrived, made it safe, new address attached. Mom had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. The last direct communication I'd had with any of them. At first, I'd told myself it was normal. They were busy. I was busy. Adult children moved away all the time, and families learned to adjust. I'd convinced myself that this space was healthy, that maybe we all needed time to figure out how to relate to each other now that I wasn't the family's built-in emergency fund and emotional support system. But as weeks turned into months, the silence started feeling less like space and more like erasure. I'd tested it in small ways. Skipped calling on Easter, no one reached out to see where I was. Didn't send Dad a card for his birthday in May radio silence. When Caleb posted photos from his graduation from some expensive certification program I was sure I'd helped pay for, I didn't comment or like the post. Nothing. It was like I'd never existed. Brighton Bay suited me in ways I hadn't expected. The town was small enough to feel manageable, but big enough that nobody felt entitled to your life story. I'd found work at a consulting firm downtown, helping small businesses streamline their operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and for the first time in my adult life, every dollar I earned was mine to keep. No emergency loans to family members, no temporary help with someone else's bills, no being volunteered to cover expenses I'd never agreed to take on. I'd started running along the coastal trail every morning, something I'd never had time for back home. I'd joined a book club at the local library. I'd even gone on a few dates, nothing serious, but enough to remember that I was interesting to people who didn't see me as a walking ATM. My apartment was a studio above a bakery, small but perfect. The smell of fresh bread drifted up through the floorboards every morning at 5 a.m., better than any alarm clock. I'd painted the walls a soft sage green and hung up artwork I'd bought from local artists at the Saturday market. There were plants everywhere, succulents and ferns, and a fiddle-leaf fig I was somehow managing to keep alive. Everything here reflected choices I'd made for myself, not compromises I'd made to keep everyone else happy. But sometimes, in moments like this one, the silence felt heavier than the freedom. I finished my coffee and got ready for work, trying to shake off the melancholy that had settled over me like fog. As I locked my apartment door, I wondered if anyone back home had even noticed I was gone, or if they'd simply closed ranks and carried on like I'd never been part of the family at all. I had no idea that by the end of the week, I'd have my answer and it would be worse than anything I'd imagined. The envelope arrived on a Friday, forwarded from my old address in Maplewood. I almost threw it away. The return address was unfamiliar, and I'd gotten tired of dealing with the random mail that still trickled in from my old life. Bills for services I'd canceled, credit card offers, political flyers for elections I could no longer vote in. But something about the weight of it made me pause. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The kind of paper that cost 3 times what normal people spent on invitations. I tore it open standing right there by my mailbox, and my stomach dropped. Caleb Mitchell and Rachel Owens request the honor of your presence. My brother was getting married. The wedding was in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, and this was the first I was hearing about it. The invitation was everything I'd expect from Rachel cream-colored paper with gold foil lettering, those fancy calligraphy fonts that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The venue was some historic mansion outside Indianapolis that I'd seen featured in wedding magazines, the kind of place that required a 2-year waiting list and a down payment that could buy a car. I stood there staring at the invitation, waiting for the hurt to hit, but instead, I felt something colder, something sharper. Because tucked behind the formal invitation was a handwritten note from my mother. Lauren, so excited you can finally meet Rachel. We know you've been so busy with your new life, but we're hoping you can help us make Caleb's day special. The venue requires a deposit of $15,000 by next week, and with your success out there, we thought you might want to contribute. Call me, Mom. I read it twice, then 3 times. They wanted $15,000, not a request and assumption. Like, of course, I'd pay for my brother's wedding venue. Like that was just something I did now. But here's what really got me finally meet Rachel. As if I hadn't been part of this family for the past year while they'd been dating, as if I was some distant relative they occasionally remembered existed. My phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity won. I pressed play and heard my mother's voice, bright and cheerful, like we'd talked yesterday instead of 8 months ago. Hi, honey. I hope you got the invitation. I wasn't sure if your new address was right. Anyway, we're all so excited about the wedding. Rachel is just perfect for Caleb, and they're planning this absolutely beautiful ceremony. The venue is gorgeous, but you know how expensive these things are. We thought since you're doing so well out there, everyone says people in Oregon make such good money, you might want to help make their day special. $15,000 would cover the venue completely, and then we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Just let me know. Can't wait to catch up. She hung up without asking how I was, without mentioning that we hadn't spoken in 8 months, without acknowledging that I'd moved across the country and they'd never once checked if I was alive. Just the money. That's all that mattered. I saved the voicemail and took a screenshot of the note, not because I was planning to do anything with them, just because I wanted proof that this had actually happened, that my family had reached out to me for the first time in 8 months to ask for $15,000. The invitation said RSVP by 2 weeks ago, which meant they'd planned this entire wedding without me, assumed I wouldn't be coming, and only remembered I existed when they needed someone to write a check. I looked at the invitation again. There was no +1 option, no mention of dietary restrictions or hotel blocks or any of the details you'd include for family members you actually wanted at your wedding. This felt more like a bill than an invitation. I went inside and poured myself a glass of wine, even though it was only 4:30 in the afternoon. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and really looked at what I was holding. The wedding was at Riverside Manor. I looked it up online. Starting prices for venue rental, $18,000. For a Saturday in October, probably closer to $25,000. So they wanted me to pay more than half the cost of a venue I'd probably never seen. For a wedding I was barely invited to. For a brother who hadn't spoken to me since I'd left. I thought about calling Caleb directly. Part of me wanted to hear his voice, to see if he even knew I'd moved. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the invitation was addressed, just my name. No, and guest. Like they'd copied it straight from an old Christmas card list without thinking about whether the information was current. Or maybe it was the realization that if Caleb had wanted me at his wedding, really wanted me there, he would have called me himself. He would have told me about Rachel. He would have asked me to be in the wedding party, or at least given me more than 6 weeks' notice. Instead, I got a forwarded invitation and a bill for $15,000. I finished my wine and put the invitation on my refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse that I'd bought at a tourist shop downtown. Every time I walked past it over the next few days, I felt that same cold anger settling deeper in my chest. They didn't want me at the wedding. They wanted my bank account at the wedding. After 34 years, I was finally seeing the difference. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the $15,000 and how casually my mother had asked for it, like she was asking me to pick up milk from the store, like it was nothing. But $15,000 wasn't nothing to me. It was 6 months of rent. It was my emergency fund. It was the money I'd saved by living on ramen and grocery store wine for 3 years while I paid off my student loans that no one in my family had helped me with. I got up at 2:30 in the morning and opened my laptop. I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I added up everything I'd given my family. It started with college. While Caleb got a full ride from mom and dad tuition, room and board, spending money, a new laptop, even a car for his 16th birthday, I'd gotten a lecture about responsibility and character building. "You're so capable, Lauren. You'll figure it out. It'll be good for you to learn independence." So I'd figured it out. 2 jobs during school, one at the campus library and another waiting tables at a sports bar that stayed open until 2 a.m. I'd applied for every scholarship I could find. Written essays about overcoming adversity while my brother posted Instagram photos from spring break in Cancun that my parents had paid for. I'd graduated with $38,000 in student loan debt. Caleb had graduated debt-free and moved back home, where mom still did his laundry and dad still paid his car insurance. But that was just the beginning. I pulled up my bank records and started scrolling. There it was, all laid out in digital black and white, 5 years of being the family ATM. September 2019, $2,000 when Caleb needed a security deposit for his apartment because he'd spent his savings on a motorcycle. January 2020, $800 when Dad's car needed transmission work and they were between paychecks. March 2020, $1,500 when Mom's hours got cut during the pandemic, even though I was working reduced hours too and living off savings. December 2020, $3,000 for family emergency dental work that turned out to be cosmetic procedures for Mom. April 2021, $1,200 when Caleb lost his job and needed help with bills money he'd promised to pay back but never had. August 2021, $2,000 for home repairs that apparently couldn't wait, even though my apartment's air conditioning had been broken for 2 months because I couldn't afford to fix it. The list went on and on. Every time, it was urgent. Every time, it was temporary. Every time, I was the only one who could help because I was doing so well and so responsible with money. What they meant was I was single. I lived cheaply, and I never said no. By 4:15 a.m., I'd tallied it all up. Over the past 5 years, I'd given my family $23,400. Not loans gifts, because every time I'd asked about being paid back, I'd gotten guilt trips about family loyalty and how money shouldn't matter between relatives. $23,000, more than I'd spent on rent in 2 years, more than my entire emergency fund, money I'd given while shopping at thrift stores and driving a 12-year-old Honda with a passenger door that stuck. Meanwhile, Caleb had lived rent-free at home for 3 years after college. He'd bought a brand new truck last year financed, but still, with parents who co-signed and probably made the down payment. He'd taken that motorcycle trip through the Southwest last summer, posting photos of expensive restaurants and boutique hotels. And now he was marrying Rachel, whose engagement ring probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and they wanted me to pay for their venue. I closed my laptop and made myself some tea, but my hands were shaking, not from caffeine, from anger. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about the pattern I was finally seeing clearly. Every time something good happened in my life, it became an opportunity for my family to need something. When I got my first promotion, suddenly Dad's car needed expensive repairs. When I moved to a nicer apartment, Mom developed a medical issue that required costly treatments not covered by insurance. When I'd started building up savings, Caleb had his series of emergencies. It was like they'd appointed me the family's financial backup plan without ever asking if I wanted the job. And the worst part, they'd convinced me it was normal, that this was what family did for each other. But it only ever went one direction. When I'd needed help moving across the country, no one offered. When I'd been stressed about finding a new job, no one checked in. When I'd been lonely and struggling to build a new life, my phone had stayed silent. But the moment they needed money, suddenly I was family again. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. All the times I'd transferred money I couldn't afford to spare because they'd made me feel selfish for hesitating. All the sacrifices I'd made for people who'd never sacrificed anything for me. The sun was starting to rise over Brighton Bay, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the light change, and felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't thinking about what my family needed from me. I was thinking about what I needed from them. And what I needed was for them to see me as more than a bank account with legs. I spent the weekend trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe they'd just been busy. Maybe the wedding planning had been overwhelming and they'd genuinely forgotten to keep me in the loop. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Then my cousin Sarah called. Sarah was the family gossip, but in the best way, she actually cared about people and kept track of everyone's lives. She was also the only family member who'd texted me when I moved, asking for my new address and if I needed anything. "Hey, stranger," she said when I picked up. "I was just looking at Caleb's wedding website and realized something weird." My stomach dropped. Wedding website. Yeah, you know how everyone does those now. Has all the details, photos of the happy couple, registry links, but Lauren, your name isn't on the contributor list. I sat down hard on my couch. Contributor list. You know, where they track who's helping pay for what. Rachel's parents are covering the catering. Your parents have the flowers and music, her brother's doing the bar, and there's this weird entry that just says, Anonymous TBD, venue. I assumed that was you, but it doesn't have your name. Anonymous TBD. They'd reduced me to 3 letters. Sarah, can you send me the link to that website? Of course, but... Lauren, are you okay? You sound strange. I managed to get through the rest of the conversation without falling apart, but as soon as I hung up, I opened the link she'd texted me. The website was everything I'd expected from Rachel Elegant Fonts, professional photos, a timeline of their relationship that read like a romance novel. There were pictures of Caleb proposing on a beach in Hawaii, a trip I was pretty sure my parents had helped pay for, photos from their engagement party at some country club, detailed descriptions of their love story. And I wasn't in any of it. Not one photo included me. Not even the family pictures they'd used, they were all from events I hadn't attended or had been cropped from. There was a whole section about their families, with individual photos and descriptions of parents, siblings, even Rachel's stepfather who'd only been in the picture for 2 years. I wasn't mentioned once. But what really got me was the wedding party page. Caleb had 3 groomsmen, his college roommate, his best friend from high school, and Rachel's brother. Rachel had 3 bridesmaids and a maid of honor. I scrolled down to see if maybe there was a separate section for family who weren't in the wedding party. Nothing. Then I found the special thanks section that Sarah had mentioned. It was laid out like a spreadsheet, showing who was contributing what to the wedding. Rachel's parents' catering and photography. My parents' flowers, music, and officiant. Her brother bar service. Various other relatives' smaller items like favors and decorations. And at the bottom, anonymous TBD, venue rental. $15,000, and they couldn't even put my name on it. I clicked through every page of the website twice, looking for any mention of me. In the How We Met story, Caleb talked about Rachel meeting his family, but it was just parents and vague references to family gatherings I'd apparently missed or been edited out of. In the photo gallery, there were dozens of pictures of them with both families. Rachel hugging my mother, Caleb and my dad at some sporting event, group shots at Christmas and Easter and birthday parties, all events that had happened while I was still living in Maplewood. But somehow I wasn't in any of the pictures. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a family photo from last Christmas I remembered it being taken. I'd been standing between my mother and Caleb, wearing the red sweater Mom had insisted we all coordinate on. But in the version on the website, I'd been cropped out entirely. The picture had been edited so seamlessly that you couldn't even tell someone was missing. They'd literally erased me from their family photos. I took screenshots of everything: the contributor list with my anonymous TBD status, the family descriptions that didn't mention me, the edited photo where I'd been cropped out like I'd never existed. But I wasn't done yet. I found the link to their wedding registry and nearly threw my laptop across the room. China pattern $800, silverware $600, a stand mixer $400, luggage set for their honeymoon $1,200. The total registry was over $15,000, the exact amount they'd asked me to contribute for the venue. They wanted me to pay for their wedding location while their friends and extended family bought them blenders and picture frames. Then I noticed something else. Next to several of the expensive items, there were little notes. This item has been purchased by Anonymous. Anonymous again. I called Sarah back. Sarah, on the registry, who is Anonymous, buying all the expensive gifts. There was a pause. Oh, honey, I thought you knew. That's your parents. They've been buying things off the registry for months, but they didn't want anyone to know how much they were spending. Your mom told my mom they liquidated some savings account to help pay for everything. My parents had liquidated savings to buy registry gifts for a wedding they'd asked me to pay for. I hung up and sat in my apartment, staring at the screenshots I'd taken. The pattern was so clear now. I couldn't believe I'd missed it before. They hadn't forgotten to include me in the wedding planning. They'd deliberately excluded me while ensuring I'd still pay for it. They'd erased me from photos and websites and family narratives, reducing me to nothing more than an anonymous bank account that could be called upon when needed. For the first time in 8 months, I was grateful for the silence, because it had shown me exactly where I stood in my family and where I didn't want to stand anymore. I waited until Monday evening to call. I wanted to catch Mom when she'd be relaxed, maybe making dinner, in a good mood. I wanted to give her every opportunity to do the right thing. She picked up on the third ring. "Oh, Lauren. Oh my goodness, I was just thinking about you. Did you get the invitation? Isn't it gorgeous Rachel has such wonderful taste?" Her voice was bright, cheerful, like we'd talked yesterday instead of 8 months ago. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't moved across the country without them noticing. "Hi, Mom. Yeah, I got it. I have a question, though." "Of course, honey. What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Am I actually invited to this wedding?" Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "What do you mean? Of course you're invited. We sent you an invitation." "You sent me a bill," I said quietly. The invitation was addressed to just me, no +1, no dietary preference card, no hotel information, and the RSVP date was 2 weeks ago. It feels less like an invitation and more like a payment request. "Lauren, don't be dramatic. You know we want you there." Do you? Because I looked at the wedding website. I'm not mentioned anywhere. Not in the family photos. Not in the story about how Rachel met everyone. Not even in the contributor list by name. I'm just Anonymous TBD. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its brightness. "Well, we weren't sure. I mean, you've been so busy with your new life out there, and you know how Rachel is about planning. She likes everything perfect. We thought it might be awkward to put you in the wedding party when you two haven't really had a chance to bond." "I'm not asking to be in the wedding party. Mom, I'm asking if I'm welcome at my own brother's wedding. Of course you're welcome, but you have to understand, this is Rachel's day too, and she's been very specific about keeping things intimate, close family only. I am close family, I'm his sister. Yes, but, well, you haven't really been around much lately. The words hit like a slap. I moved 8 months ago. In 8 months, not one of you has called to check on me. Not once. But the moment you need money, suddenly you remember I exist. That's not fair. Lauren, you know we think about you all the time. Do you? What's my address? Mom. Silence. Well, what's my job title? When's the last time you asked how I'm doing? Do you even know what state I live in? Lauren, you're being unreasonable. I live in Oregon. I've been here for 8 months. I have a new job, a new apartment, a completely new life. And none of you noticed. But you noticed when you needed $15,000. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. We thought you were doing so well. You always land on your feet, and Caleb really needs this. Lauren, this wedding means everything to him. What about what means everything to me? Don't be selfish, Lauren, this is about family. There it was, the word they always used when they wanted something from me. Family, as if the concept only applied when it was convenient for them. You're right, I said. This is about family. So let me ask you directly, does Caleb want me at his wedding? Of course he does. No. Mom, has Caleb specifically said he wants me there? Has he asked about me at all during the planning? Has he wondered why I haven't been involved? The silence stretched so long I could hear the TV in the background. Some cooking show. The cheerful voice of a chef explaining how to make the perfect roast. He's been very busy with the planning, she finally said. That's not an answer. Lauren, I don't understand why you're making this so difficult. We're trying to include you. You're trying to use me. There's a difference. I could hear her getting flustered now, the way she always did when she couldn't control the narrative. That's not true. We love you. We want you to be part of this special day. Then why did you crop me out of the family photo on the website? Sharp intake of breath. How did you? I was there, Mom. I remember taking that picture. I was standing right between you and Caleb. But somehow, in the version on Rachel's website, I just disappeared. Rachel was just trying to make the photo look better for the website. By erasing me from it. It wasn't personal, Lauren. It was just aesthetic. I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth. Delivered so casually she probably didn't even realize what she'd said. I wasn't family. I was a flaw in the aesthetic. So, let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. I'm not important enough to include in wedding planning. I'm not close enough to be in family photos. I'm not worth mentioning on the website or checking on for 8 months. But I am important enough to pay for the venue. Lauren, here's what I think. Mom, I think you and Dad and Caleb have gotten very comfortable with me being the family bank account. I think you've spent so many years treating me like an ATM that you forgot I'm actually a person. That's not true. It is true. And you know what I'm done. I'm done being anonymous. I'm done paying for parties I'm not really invited to. I'm done being erased from family photos and then asked to fund family events. Lauren, please don't do this. Caleb is counting on... I cut her off with words that came from somewhere deep and cold inside me. Then maybe Caleb should have counted me in. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 34 years, I'd hung up on my mother, and instead of feeling guilty, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt free. I turned my phone back on the next morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from my mother, progressing from confused to hurt to angry to panicked. A few were from my father, awkward, stilted messages that read like someone had put a gun to his head and forced him to type them. But none were from Caleb. That told me everything I needed to know. I made coffee and started going through the messages systematically, taking screenshots of each one. Not because I planned to do anything with them immediately, but because I was starting to understand that I needed evidence. I needed proof of what they said versus what they actually meant. Mom's messages were particularly revealing. "Lauren, please call me back. I think there was a misunderstanding. Your father is very upset. This isn't like you. We've always supported your independence, but this is going too far. Caleb doesn't know about our conversation. Please don't ruin his special day. You're being very hurtful. This is supposed to be a happy time for our family. If you don't want to contribute to the venue, fine, but please don't punish Caleb for our miscommunication." That last one made me laugh out loud. Miscommunication. As if 8 months of silence and being cropped out of family photos was just a simple misunderstanding. But it was Dad's final message that really got to me. "Why, Lauren, your mother is crying. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Just send the money and we can all move on." Just send the money and we can all move on. 34 years of my relationship with my family, reduced to that one sentence. I spent the rest of the week in a strange kind of peace. I went to work, ran my morning routes along the coast, cooked dinner for myself in my quiet apartment. I didn't answer any calls from Indiana area codes. I didn't respond to any texts. I just existed in my own life, without the constant background noise of family obligation and guilt. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in years. Then on Friday, something interesting happened. I got a text from Caleb. Not about the wedding, not about money, about a check I'd written 3 months ago. "Hey, Lauren, weird question. Did you send me something back in June? Mom said there was never anything from you, but I found this deposit slip in my stuff with your name on it." I stared at the message for a long time, because I had sent him something in June, a check for $3,000, along with a note congratulating him on his new house purchase. I'd mailed it to my parents' house with instructions to forward it to him. My mother had kept it. My mother had taken $3,000 I'd sent to help my brother buy his first house, deposited it, and never told him it came from me. I took a screenshot of Caleb's text, then went to my online banking and found the scanned image of the canceled check, $3,000, written out to Caleb Mitchell with "Congrats on the house" in the memo line. It had been cashed 4 days after I sent it. I sent both images to Caleb. His response came back almost immediately. "What the fuck?" Then, "Mom told me you didn't respond to the housewarming invitation. She said you were too busy with your new life to care about family milestones. She kept this." Lauren, what else don't I know? I stared at my phone for a long time before responding, because this was it, the moment I could either keep protecting my family's dysfunction or start telling the truth. I chose the truth. "That's not the only thing she kept from you." I spent the next hour putting together what I'd started thinking of as my evidence file. Screenshots of the wedding website showing my anonymous TBD status, the cropped family photo, the registry with their anonymous purchases, bank records showing 5 years of financial contributions they'd never acknowledged, the original wedding invitation with my mother's note asking for $15,000. I sent it all to Caleb in one long message, with this explanation. "This is what our family looks like from where I'm sitting. I moved to Oregon 8 months ago. No one called, no one checked if I made it safely, no one asked how I was doing. But the moment you announced your wedding, I got a bill for $15K. I'm not mad about the money, I'm mad about being erased from this family, except when you need something from me. Look at your own wedding website. Caleb, tell me where I fit in that picture." Then I added, "I love you. I want you to be happy. But I'm done being treated like an ATM with legs." He didn't respond right away, and I didn't expect him to. This was a lot to process, and I could imagine the conversations happening in Maplewood right now. But late that night, at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with one more message from him. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Lauren, I didn't know any of this. Can we talk?" I looked at that message for a long time before typing back. "I'd like that, but not until after your wedding. This is your time to be happy. We can figure out the family stuff later. Are you coming? I thought about it, really thought about whether I wanted to sit in a room full of people who'd spent months planning an event without me, pretending to smile while they celebrated with money I'd been expected to provide. I wasn't really invited. Remember, I was just asked to pay for it. Lauren, enjoy your wedding. Caleb, I mean that, but I won't be there. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out what came next. But tonight, for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was finally seeing my family clearly. And what I saw was that I'd been fighting for a place at a table where no seat had ever been set for me. The week before the wedding, the desperation really started to show. First came the guilt texts from my mother, each one more dramatic than the last. Then my father started calling, leaving voicemails that sounded like he was reading from a script. Even my Aunt Patricia reached out, my mother's sister, who I'd spoken to maybe 5 times in my entire life, asking if I was going through something and needed to talk. But the breaking point came on Tuesday, when I got a text from my cousin Sarah. Lauren, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your mom is telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. She's saying you've become bitter and selfish since moving away, and that you're trying to sabotage Caleb's wedding out of jealousy. I stared at that message until the words blurred. Then I called Sarah directly. What exactly is she saying? Sarah sighed. She's telling people you demanded to be in the wedding party, and when they said no, you refused to come at all. She's saying you've changed since you moved, that you've become materialistic and only care about money now. She told my mom you tried to hold the wedding hostage for $15,000. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd taken the truth and flipped it completely upside down. Sarah, you know that's not true, right? Of course I know it's not true. I've seen the evidence you sent Caleb. But Lauren, this is getting ugly. She's really committed to this narrative, and with the wedding this weekend, everyone's just going along with it because they don't want drama. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easily they'd rewritten history, how willing everyone was to believe their version because it was simpler than acknowledging the truth. But then something occurred to me. My mother had made one critical mistake in her campaign against me. She'd forgotten that I had proof. On Wednesday evening, I did something I'd never done before. I made a video. I sat in my kitchen with my laptop, wearing a simple blue sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back. I looked exactly like what I was tired, hurt, but finally ready to tell the truth. Hi, I said to the camera. My name is Lauren Mitchell. Some of you might know me as Caleb Mitchell's sister. This weekend is his wedding, and I won't be there. I kept it simple. I explained about moving to Oregon 8 months ago and the silence that followed. I showed the wedding invitation with my mother's note demanding $15,000. I displayed the wedding website where I'd been reduced to anonymous TBD and cropped out of family photos. I didn't attack anyone. I didn't call names or make accusations. I just laid out the facts, calmly and clearly. I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone or ruin anyone's special day, I said near the end. I'm sharing it because I've spent 34 years being told that my version of events isn't real, that I'm too sensitive, too dramatic, too selfish. But this is what gaslighting looks like in real life. This is what happens when a family decides one person exists solely to serve the others. I paused, looking directly into the camera. I love my brother. I want him to be happy, but I refuse to pay for the privilege of being erased. I uploaded the video to a private account and sent the link to 3 people: Sarah, my cousin David on my father's side, and Mrs. Henderson, my high school English teacher who still lived in Maplewood and somehow managed to know everything that happened in town. I trusted these 3 people to use their judgment about whether and how to share it. Within 12 hours, my phone was exploding. Apparently, Mrs. Henderson had shared the video in the local Facebook group where she posted updates about former students. Sarah had sent it to her mother, who'd forwarded it to half the family. David had shown it to his wife, who'd posted it in their church group. By Thursday afternoon, it seemed like half of Maplewood had seen it. The responses were mixed. But the ones that mattered were clear. People who'd known me my whole life were reaching out, saying they'd had no idea what was really going on. Several family friends mentioned they'd always wondered why I seemed to struggle financially despite having a good job, while Caleb always seemed to have money for new toys and trips. My high school best friend messaged me, "Holy shit, Lauren. I remember your mom asking me if you were doing okay financially after you bought that used car junior year. Now I realize she was fishing to see if you had money to spare." But the message that really got to me came from Rachel's maid of honor, someone I'd never even met. "I don't know you, but I saw your video. Rachel has been stressed about wedding expenses, and your mom kept insisting money wasn't an issue because Lauren would cover anything they couldn't afford. We thought you were some rich aunt or something. I had no idea you were just his sister who they'd cut out of everything." So even Rachel didn't know the truth. She probably thought I was some wealthy relative who was selfishly withholding help, not a sister who'd been systematically erased from the family narrative. On Friday morning, exactly 24 hours before the wedding, I got a call from my mother. "Lauren, you need to take that video down right now." Her voice was different, not the fake cheerfulness or manipulative guilt. She sounded panicked. "People are asking questions," she continued. "They're saying things. This is embarrassing for the whole family." "Good," I said simply. "Good, Lauren. How can you say that this is your brother's wedding weekend?" "And yet, for some reason, I'm not at his wedding." "You could be if you wanted to be. You're choosing not to come." "I'm choosing not to pay $15,000 for the privilege of being treated like a stranger at my own brother's wedding." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "We can talk about the money later. Just please, delete the video and come to the wedding. People are talking." "Let them talk. Mom, for the first time in my life, they're talking about the truth." I hung up and turned off my phone. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my little balcony, watching the sunset over the Pacific. Tomorrow would be my brother's wedding day, and I wouldn't be there. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I spent Saturday morning hiking the coastal trail, deliberately avoiding social media and keeping my phone on airplane mode. I didn't want to see wedding photos. I didn't want to know how it was going. I just wanted to exist in my own space, breathing salt air and feeling sand between my toes. But by evening, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on to find 67 notifications. The first few were what I expected, family members demanding I delete the video. Angry messages about ruining Caleb's special day, the usual guilt and manipulation tactics. But as I scrolled down, the tone changed. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, high school classmates, family friends, even some of Rachel's relatives who'd apparently seen the video through the small-town gossip network. "Lauren, I had no idea. Your mom told everyone you were too busy and successful to bother with family events." "Well, we all thought you were some kind of career woman who looked down on small-town life." "I remember your mom saying you made so much money you didn't know what to do with it all." But it was Sarah's message that told me everything I needed to know. "Girl, you broke them. The wedding was chaos. People kept asking where you were, and when your parents tried to give their rehearsed speech about you being too busy, Mrs. Henderson literally stood up and said she'd seen your video. Half the reception was people on their phones watching it." She continued. "Your mom tried to do damage control, but it backfired. She started crying and saying you were going through something and making it all about her. Rachel looked mortified. Caleb looked confused. Your dad just sat there like he wanted to disappear. But here's the best part when they did the toast where they were supposed to thank people for their contributions. They couldn't figure out how to acknowledge the venue without mentioning that you didn't pay for it. They just awkwardly skipped over it." I could picture it perfectly. My mother, who'd spent months crafting a narrative where I was the selfish sister who'd abandoned the family, suddenly confronted with a room full of people who'd seen the truth. The final blow came in a message from someone I didn't recognize, a +1 of one of Rachel's bridesmaids. "I don't know you, but I was at your brother's wedding tonight. During the reception, your mom got up and said she wanted to clarify some misunderstandings about your video. She said you'd edited things to make yourself look like a victim and that you'd demanded money from them. But then this older woman, I think she was your teacher, stood up with printed copies of your bank records that she said you'd shared. She started reading off all the money you'd given your family over the years. The room went dead silent. Mrs. Henderson. Of course she'd printed out the evidence. She'd probably made copies for everyone. Your mom sat down and didn't say another word for the rest of the night. I felt so bad for the bride and groom. I should have felt guilty about that, about disrupting Caleb's wedding, about embarrassing my parents in front of their friends and family, but I didn't. Because for the first time in 34 years, people knew the truth. The last message that really mattered came from Caleb himself, sent at 11:53 p.m. Lauren, we need to talk. Not about the wedding, not about Mom and Dad. Just us. When you're ready. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. I'm sorry I never asked questions. I'm sorry you felt like you had to disappear to get anyone's attention. You're my sister. That should have meant something. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. It did mean something. That's why this hurt so much. On Sunday morning, I opened my laptop and typed out one final post, not a video this time. Just words. Yesterday was my brother's wedding. I wasn't there, and that's okay. For the first time in my adult life, I chose my own peace over my family's expectations. Some people will say I should have just paid the money and kept quiet. That family is family, no matter what. That I should have been the bigger person. But here's what I've learned. You can't be the bigger person forever. Eventually, you have to be a whole person, and whole people don't pay for the privilege of being erased. I don't regret the video. I don't regret telling the truth. I don't regret choosing myself for once. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, you matter. Your feelings matter. Your boundaries matter. And you don't owe anyone access to your wallet just because you share DNA. Family isn't a debt you owe. It's a relationship you build, and relationships require mutual respect, not just one-way ATM services. I'm done being anonymous. I'm done being TBD. I'm done being the family's best-kept secret who only matters when the bills come due. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I moved to Oregon 8 months ago, and I'm exactly where I belong. I posted it, closed my laptop, and made myself breakfast. Outside my kitchen window, the Pacific stretched endlessly toward the horizon, and for the first time in years, the future felt as wide open as that view. I had work on Monday. I had a book club meeting on Tuesday. I had a life that belonged entirely to me. And that felt like the greatest revenge of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with some of you out there who might be fighting similar battles with family expectations and boundaries. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from and whether any part of this felt familiar. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, and please share your own thoughts about family dynamics and setting boundaries. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply tell the truth about our experiences and realize we're not alone.